All right, hello everybody. You guys have another snow day today, but unfortunately we need to get through some material that will be on your test, which is going to be on Tuesday. Okay, test on Tuesday. You guys had to watch a video about Alexander the Great. I'm going to go over the answers to that video question sheet, and then we're going to go on and talk a little bit more about Hellenism, all right, which is going to be on the test. Okay. So the first one is, who is said to be Alexander the Great's real father? And that would be the Greek god Zeus. Who was Alexander's tutor? It was Aristotle. You guys learned a bit about him during the Philosopher's Station activity. And he taught Alexander all about philosophy, morals, logic, religion, and art. What happened at King Philip's II wedding? Right, what happened at his second wedding? And his new father-in-law kind of insulted and insinuated that Alexander wasn't fit to be the successor to the Macedonian Empire, right? The Macedonian dynasty. He wasn't fit to be the king, right? And Alexander lashed out in anger and threw a cup at him, and then his own father tried to kill him, but he was too drunk, right? And it ended up leading Alexander and his mother into his self-exile, right? But Alexander's father was able to convince him to come back because he truly was not going to replace him as heir, right? Number 4, what is one theory behind the assassination of King Philip? Right, there's one theory that it was a former lover who acted out in revenge because Philip had left him for a younger man. And the second theory is that Olympias and Alexander were the ones who instigated the assassination, organized it. What is one way Alexander secured his rule? Right, one way is that he burned Thebes, and another is that he killed anybody he felt was a threat. Right, that includes his stepmother's father. That includes children of his father by other women. Right, anyone that he deemed a threat. 3 things that he did in Egypt was restore temples. He built new monuments to Egyptian gods, not Greek gods. And he created the city of Alexandria, which would really become a cultural hub during the Hellenistic period. All right, it took him 6 years to defeat Persia, and he finished up when he was about 25. And his comrades began to resent him because he began adopting Persian customs and practices. He started dressing like a Persian. He had his men kiss his hand and bow to him. And he also married a Persian woman, right? And that made them very angry. Right. The edge of the world to the Greeks was modern-day Pakistan and India, also known as the Indus River Valley civilization. That's where that is located. All right, so they reached all the way down there. Right, and the Hellenistic kingdoms were the 3 kingdoms that were created after the death of Alexander, right? How his empire was split up by his different generals. All right, now we're going to move on to Hellenism and a little bit more information about Alexander the Great and his legacy. And I want you guys to take notes, all right? And there will be a little short, like 5-question quiz on Schoology afterwards for you to complete on information from this lecture, okay? So starting out, this is a really cropped in portion of the Alexander mosaic, right? And again, a mosaic is just a bunch of little tiles or glass that's broken and then put back together to form an image. Right, you can see just the detail, right? And this is actually on the floor of a house in Pompeii, right? Pompeii in Italy, right? And this was actually created hundreds of years after the death of Alexander. So you can see just how important and impactful his legacy was on other parts of the world, even those not under his control or not even conquered by him. All right, and in Pompeii, of course, the Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, which led the entire city, and Herculaneum, another city a little bit north, I believe, to be covered in volcanic ash. And it really preserved much of the city, much of the art, the mosaics, the frescoes, right, which is that painted plaster. And then it also preserved people. All right, but this is one of those pieces that was preserved due to the volcano eruption, right? A mosaic of Alexander the Great battling against Darius, right? The king of Persia at that time. All right, I'm going to move on to Hellenism, and I'm going to go through this through the 5 W's. All right, when we get back from Christmas break, you're going to have a couple weeks, and then we're going to be doing a DBQ, or document-based question, on Rome. All right, and with that, that's an essay based on documents, and you will need to be able to organize information into the 5 W's, right? Just like any essay, just like the enduring issue essay, you need to be able to ask yourselves more questions about information regarding who, what, where, when, and why in order to really answer the question, right, for any essay. So I will go through Hellenism through this lens. Starting off with who, of course, the most important is Alexander the Great. Right? He slayed so hard, and he was the Prince of Macedon until he took over from his father, King Philip II. He succeeded when he was around 20 to 21 years old, and he was known as an amazing military leader in general. Right? He built an empire stretching from Greece, Macedonia, which is like right north of Greece, and it stretched into Asia, India, and Egypt. All right, so much of the world at this time, okay? And he died in 323 BCE without having named an heir to his empire. All right, you guys heard in the video when he was asked who the heir to his empire would be, all he said was to the strongest. Obviously, that's not very helpful. So a power struggle ensued, right? And those 3 people that came up on top were the 3 generals. First one was Ptolemy the First of Soter. He was one of Alexander's generals, and he was the one who took over control of Egypt. All right. And here we can see Alexandria, Memphis, and Thebes. All right. This is the one where he burned it down. All right, so Ptolemy took over Egypt, and he would begin the Ptolemaic dynasty, of course. And Queen Cleopatra, who we all know and love, was actually a part of this Ptolemaic dynasty. She's actually Greek. And then we have Seleucus, who was another one of Alexander's generals, and he took over the eastern portion of the empire. All right, this huge amount of land, okay? And right here we see what they thought was the edge of the world. In India and Pakistan, the Indus River Valley. We have the Indus right there. And it would eventually be taken over again by the Mauryan Empire, which you can see a little bit right there. And in this huge swath of land, we have Babylon right here on the Tigris and Euphrates. All right, and so this is where the Babylon Empire started, and it is where Alexander was really welcomed into the Persian Empire. All right, so that's where Babylon is, and right here is Persepolis, all right, the former capital of the Persian Empire. All right, we know Persepolis. All right, and then Antigonus is the 3rd general that took over a major part of the empire, and he took over the western part. All right, he really was the only one to continue to try to build his empire, like build his own part of the empire. So he received this part, and he also took back over parts of Greece and Macedonia. All right, and his dynasty in Macedonia lasted until Roman conquest. And fun fact, he only had one eye. And if you saw in the video, King Philip II also only had one eye. These people are warriors, okay? All right, so that was the most important part of who for the Hellenistic period. And so what happened All right, what is Hellenism all about? What caused it? What was the outcome? All right, those are kind of questions you need to ask yourself when you get to the what stage of the 5 W's. All right, what happened? What caused it? What was the outcome? So obviously, what initially caused Hellenistic culture to develop was military conquest. All right, Alexander going through all of that land and taking over through conquering the area. All right, but it also happened because cultures began to blend. Right, this idea of cultural diffusion was present here. All right, Alexander had a great deal of tolerance to these local areas. We saw that Egypt really took him in as a pharaoh and as a king and liberator from Persia. All right, so this is what Hellenism is. All right, it's a blending of Greek culture, Persian culture, Egyptian, and Indian culture. All right, all those different areas that became under Greek control because of Alexander. Right, but the tolerance of allowing local leaders to rule. All right, and allowing religious practices of that area to continue on. Right, we saw in the video that Alexander built new monuments to Egyptian gods. He really respected local religions and cultures and took on some of them. Right, instead of forcing Greek culture onto them, it became a more natural blending as they appreciated each other. Right, and really be familiar with this diagram because it is going to be something that you'll see on the Regents exam. All right, this little puzzle piece showing the blending of the cultures. Right, another big part of what happened due to this mixing of cultures is shifting images in art. Right, we saw a lot in ancient Greece and classical Greece, this perfection in art, perfection in the body, and this also serene face, this calm face. Right, that changed with Hellenism. Right, art began to develop into more realistic styles and depicted subjects that were not so perfect, right, not so ideal. Right, we have right here the idea of grotesques. All right, obviously grotesques. All right, this is a beggar woman. You can see her collarbones and her ribs. You can see the wrinkles in her face, like just her emotion. All right, this isn't something that you would see in classical Greece. All right, it's imperfect. She's so skinny. She's poor. She's hungry. Right, she's begging for food. She's begging for money. Right, she's begging for anything. All right, this is a very new concept for art. All right, and this happened because of the blending of cultures, the cultural diffusion, the new ideas brought in from other cultures as Alexander went through the East, okay? And then this, again, is my favorite sculpture, Laocoon and his sons. And this is also Hellenistic. Right, just the expressions on his face, a very very different idea than what was done in classical Greece. Something else that happened was the building of Alexandria. Of course, that was due to Alexander creating in Egypt. And a big part of that was the Lighthouse of Alexandria. All right, this is one of the ancient wonders of the world. And it looks a little crazy because of this flame up here, but that is how, obviously they didn't have light bulbs back then. So this is the light that would guide ships. All right, mirrors and flames. Or during the daytime, the sun. And these two coins right here are from Ptolemaic Egypt. And you can just see how classically Greek these two coins are. Right, the cultures blended. And Alexandria was the cultural capital of the Hellenistic world. Right, he and his successors really encouraged scholarship, academia, right, knowledge. And the Great Museum was built with labs, lecture halls, and a zoo. Also in Alexandria was a library with thousands of different scrolls showcasing the accumulated or built up knowledge of the ancient world, right? And all of that would later be destroyed in a fire. Right? New ideas also came out of the Hellenistic period, right? You guys learned a little bit about Zeno of Citium as well, and he was the founder of Stoicism. And his whole idea was to avoid desires by accepting calmly whatever life brought to you, make lemonade out of lemons, if you will, and having high moral standards and equality, you know, as he saw everyone in society, men, women, slaves, even, to have the power of reason, right? So he felt that equality was necessary. Coming out of the Hellenistic period was also heliocentrism. Oh my gosh, heliocentrism, which is the idea that the sun is the center of our solar system. Right? Before this time, before Aristarchus, however you pronounce that, came along, it was widely believed that the Earth was the center of the solar system and everything else revolved around Earth. Right? But he realized that it was actually the sun that we revolved around. Right? And his ideas were not accepted until 2,000 years later in the 1500s. Right? So very ahead of his time. All right, it's also come up during this time that the Earth was round and not flat. Very interesting. Right, and for women, new legal codes allowed women out of their homes. Right, during classical Greece, they were confined to their homes. And this changed during the Hellenistic period. They learned how to read and write, and some of them were able to become philosophers or poets. Right, the icon Queen Cleopatra is a result of this Hellenism. And again, she is a part of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Okay, a couple more important people who I'm still including in the what section, because this really only happened because of the blending of culture, right? The blending of Hellenism. Okay, we have Hippocrates, who, if you've ever heard of the Hippocratic Oath, this is who it comes from. Being a hypocrite also comes from him. And it is a moral standard for physicians, for doctors. And he studied the causes and cures for illnesses and was much more science-based than others of his time. Right, we have Pythagoras, who studied in Egypt and Babylon and created the Pythagorean theorem, the formula to calculate the relationship between the sides of a right triangle, right? A squared plus b squared equals c squared. And then we also have Archimedes, who used physics to create practical inventions, and he mastered the lever and pulley systems, right? And those are both simple machines, but it's still something that is incredibly helpful in daily life. And you can even see how Hellenistic this bust is. Right? He looked angry. He doesn't look very happy. And that is not something that you would have seen in classical Greek art, right? Very Hellenistic, his bust. Right? He also came up with the Archimedes screw, which was used to lift water to higher levels for irrigation. All right, so where, right? On to the next W, where. All right, so for this is a map of the empire. All right, this is right here. It's going to be all of Antigonus's territory with time. This is the Ptolemaic Egypt. And then this is Seleucus's territory, okay? You can see Athens right here, Sparta. We got Babylon right here, Persepolis, which was the capital of the Persian Empire. All right, this is the Indus River Valley, right, where the Indus River Valley civilization grew up along. And this would eventually be taken back over by the Mauryan Empire. All right, here's the Tigris and the Euphrates, the Nile River down here, and right here on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea is Alexandria. All right, so I just want you guys to really take in how connected the world is inside of his empire. All right, and this is 336 to 323 BCE. It was under Alexander's rule. All right, and then this, of course, it was broken up by the three generals. All right, and then why? Why is this important? Why did they do it? Why did they conquer all this land? What were their motives? All right, of course, it could just be arrogance. All right, it said in the video that Alexander was a very ambitious man. He wanted to control a bunch of area. He wanted to build an empire. He wanted to be important, right? And he really succeeded in that, where his legacy hundreds of years later was still depicted by the Romans, right? By those in Italy who wasn't even under Alexander's control. We still talk about him today. He's still relevant. He's still important today, right? And having Greek rulers over these non-Greek areas really helped spread their culture, right? Greek culture, that is. All right, and it was done through warfare, tolerance, and appreciation. All right, we saw in the video that Alexander was adopting Persian customs. He began to dress like them. He began to act like them. He married a Persian woman. All right, and he also really admired and respected Egyptian culture. All right, so much so that he was seen as a liberator from the Persians, and he was celebrated and accepted with open arms by the Egyptians. All right, the Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt took down much of the Egyptian culture as well after Alexander died and the empire was split up. Ptolemy really accepted Egyptian culture as well. Right? They even called themselves pharaohs, and they adopted Egyptian religious customs. And Queen Cleopatra, of course, again, we love her, is a part of this Ptolemaic dynasty. Right? And Ptolemaic Egypt is also why we even know how to read hieroglyphics. Again, this is the Rosetta Stone. You should all remember this. And we know that because of the Greeks who took over Egypt and copied it down. All right, they translated it. And then, of course, do we know if all of this was truly appreciation or a way to secure their rule? No. All right, but they were able to do this through violence, religion, and diplomacy. Right? They were able to create these cultures that blended together and really formed this new way of looking at the world, these new values, these new arts, right, through the expansion of Alexander the Great's empire. Right, and again, this diagram, right, the blending of these cultures were very important, right, and it led to this huge part of history that still really affects the world. Okay, right, and I think that's all I have for you. I'm gonna put up a little quiz on Schoology for you guys to complete, and then you'll be done. Okay, and once again, the test is on Tuesday next week, right? 14th, 15th, 16th, the 17th of December. Okay.